In the shadows of a darkened apartment, a man battles a curse that consumes everything it touches. But what if the curse isn't something you run from, but something you become? Once it claims you, there's no escaping. You are its next victim. Welcome to the darkness, where fear is eternal. It all started with a dream. Adam Ellis had just moved into a modest apartment in New York. It was quiet, cozy, and just big enough for one person. The first few nights were peaceful, until the dreams started. In one of them, he found himself standing in a vast, empty room with only a single green armchair in the corner. Sitting in that chair was a child. The boy had a strange, distorted head, dented on one side like it had been crushed. He sat motionless, staring at Adam with lifeless eyes. And then the boy stood up. Adam couldn't move. In the dream, the boy shuffled toward him, and just as he got close enough to speak, he whispered, "You can ask me 2 questions, but only if you say 'Dear David' first." Adam, confused but curious, asked, "Dear David, how did you die?" David replied flatly, "An accident in a store." Adam continued, "Dear David, what happened in the store?" David answered, "A shelf was pushed on me." Adam was about to ask a third question, but forgot to say, "Dear David" first. David's expression changed. His eyes turned dark, his mouth twisted in rage. Then Adam woke up, heart pounding, drenched in sweat. The dream felt more than real. It felt like a warning. Adam couldn't shake the dream. He woke up gasping, sweat clinging to his skin despite the cool air of his bedroom. He sat up and reached for his phone, 3:17 a.m. He opened his notes app and typed everything he could remember. The name David, the rules about asking questions, and the boy's distorted head. It felt important, urgent, like forgetting it would invite something worse. That day, Adam tried to carry on with normal life. He worked, scrolled through his emails, made coffee, but a heavy unease clung to him. Every time he passed a mirror, he half expected to see someone else behind him. He kept glancing toward the corners of rooms, convinced he wasn't alone. His cat, Maxwell, stared blankly at the front door for hours, ears twitching, fur raised. That wasn't normal. A few nights later, the dream returned. Same green chair. Same silent room. Same child sitting still as a statue. Adam steeled himself. "Dear David," he began cautiously, "how did you die?" "An accident in a store," David replied again, just like before. "Dear David, what happened in the store?" "A shelf was pushed on me." Adam hesitated. This was where he had gone wrong last time. But what if he tried something different? He paused, but curiosity overtook him. "Who pushed the shelf?" he asked. "No, dear David. Just a question." David's eyes narrowed. Slowly, ever so slowly, the child rose from the chair. His limbs were stiff, like a puppet pulled by invisible strings. The air in the room grew thick, suffocating. Adam's mouth dried up. The boy's twisted head tilted to the side, and a soft growl came from his throat. Not quite human, not quite animal. "You asked a third question," David hissed, his voice warping into something else entirely. The green walls of the room began to peel. The ceiling creaked. Something unseen pressed against Adam's chest, pinning him down. His eyes flew open and he awoke in his bed, gasping for breath. Only, he wasn't alone. Maxwell, his cat, was standing at the edge of the bed, back arched, tail puffed. He was hissing at something Adam couldn't see. Then came the sound. A soft dragging noise. From the hallway outside his room. It was faint but unmistakable, like something small limping across the wooden floor. Adam froze. He remembered the warning from his dream. Never ask a third question. And now he had. The next morning, Adam tried to convince himself it had been a vivid nightmare. That's all. Just a dream. But the hissing, he couldn't explain that. Maxwell had been terrified of something. And worse, Adam could still hear that dragging sound in his memory, slow and deliberate, like someone with one leg shorter than the other scraping their feet across the hardwood floor. He walked cautiously down the hallway, heart thudding in his chest. Every creak underfoot felt like it echoed louder than it should. He checked every room, every corner, every closet. Nothing. The apartment was empty. But he couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. Something was different now. He decided to install motion-activated cameras in his living room and hallway. Maybe it would give him peace of mind. Or maybe, just maybe, it would capture something. Something real. That night, the apartment felt colder. the kind of cold that settles in your bones and makes your skin crawl. He wrapped himself in blankets and stared at the hallway until his eyes grew heavy. Sleep came reluctantly, full of fragmented dreams, of broken shelves, whispers he couldn't understand, and a child's silhouette at the foot of his bed. The next morning, Adam checked the footage. At first, nothing. The hallway light flickered once, but it might have been the bulb. He fast-forwarded through hours of stillness, of empty frames. Then, at 2:53 a.m., something changed. Maxwell walked into the living room as if drawn by something. He stared at the front door for a solid minute. Then, slowly he turned his head toward the couch. And there, just for a second, the camera caught movement. A cushion indented, as if someone had sat down. But no one was there. Adam's breath caught in his throat. He rewound the footage, played it again, slowed it down. Still the same, Maxwell staring, the invisible pressure on the cushion, and a faint, dark shape for just a frame or two. Like a shadow without a body. That night, Adam didn't sleep. Instead, he kept all the lights on and sat upright in bed, heart pounding at every creak of the floor or rustle of the curtains. He had broken the rule. And now, David wasn't just a dream. David was here. Sleep became a luxury Adam could no longer afford. Every time he closed his eyes, he expected to see that damn green armchair again, that horrible empty room with its cracked walls and a single child staring through him. Instead, what haunted him now was his own apartment, his own furniture. The world he once trusted felt foreign and warped. It was late, sometime after midnight. Adam sat in the corner of his living room, laptop glowing, rewatching the footage. The moment the cushion dipped replayed again and again, but he noticed something new, something chilling. In the corner of the screen just before the cushion sank, the shadows shifted. Not like a trick of light, not like something abstract. They moved with purpose. He paused the frame, zoomed in. The shadows formed the silhouette of a small child, standing just behind the couch. The breath left his lungs. He closed the laptop, heart racing. He couldn't stay here. Not tonight. He grabbed his keys and left the apartment without looking back. He walked the streets of the city for hours, aimless. The late-night sounds of traffic and the hum of streetlights were oddly comforting. It felt real. It felt safe. By the time dawn painted the sky in muted gray and gold, Adam returned. The apartment was silent. Too silent. He opened the door and paused. There, in the middle of the living room, was a chair. Not his chair. It was green. Faded, worn, and unfamiliar. It hadn't been there the night before. Adam stepped back, nearly dropping his keys. This had to be some sick prank. Someone had broken in and placed it there. Right? He approached slowly. The air around it felt thick, heavy. His cat hissed from the hallway, refusing to come any closer. Adam reached out just to touch the chair to prove it was solid. His fingers hovered an inch away, when suddenly the cushion shifted. As if something had just moved off it. Adam stumbled back, heart pounding in his ears. Then he heard it. A whisper. Low and sharp. Coming from the hallway. You weren't supposed to ask. The temperature dropped. The lights flickered. And for a split second, Adam swore he saw something dart across the room, small, fast, low to the ground. Like a child on all fours. He didn't sleep that night. Not even with every light on. The chair remained. And from that point on, the apartment was no longer his. It was David's. Adam didn't touch the green chair. He didn't move it. He didn't even sit near it. He simply avoided it like one would avoid the open mouth of a predator, instinctively, fearfully, helplessly. But the chair didn't care. It remained there in the middle of the living room like it had always belonged, like it had always been waiting for something, or someone. The next few nights brought only dread. The kind of dread that crept under the skin and pulsed with every heartbeat. Adam started seeing movement in the reflections of the windows, small figures darting across the glass when no one else was home. He unplugged the mirrors. He covered them. He stopped checking his own reflection. One night, as he scrolled mindlessly through old emails just to keep his mind busy, he noticed something strange. A photo. It wasn't in his camera roll. It wasn't something he had ever taken. But it was there, an image attached to a draft email in his outbox. The subject line was blank. No recipient. Just one attachment. He opened it. The picture was dark and grainy, clearly taken at night. But Adam recognized the room instantly. It was his bedroom. The photo had been taken from inside the room, facing his bed. And there, standing at the foot of the bed, was the silhouette of a child. Adam dropped the phone. It clattered across the hardwood floor as his stomach turned. His breath came in short, uneven gasps. How did that photo get taken? Who took it? And worse, when? His phone buzzed. A notification. Camera motion detected, living room. With shaking fingers he opened the app. The feed loaded slowly. At first nothing. Just the stillness of the room, dimly lit by the hallway light he always left on now. But then, a figure moved. From behind the green chair something rose. A small head, misshapen, tilting ever so slightly. Two eyes gleamed faintly in the darkness, like reflections in an animal's gaze. They stared directly into the camera. Adam slammed the phone down. His cat, Maxwell, began growling, a deep, guttural sound he'd never made before. And then came the tapping. From the inside of the walls. Light at first, then heavier, like fingers, then fists, knocking. Adam didn't sleep. He sat in the kitchen with every light on, knife in hand, waiting for morning. But the worst part wasn't the noise or the photo or the green chair. It was the feeling that someone was standing just inches behind him. Watching, breathing, waiting. Morning came, but it brought no relief. Adam's eyes burned with exhaustion, his hands trembling as he poured coffee he wouldn't even drink. The kitchen felt off, like the air was heavier, almost sticky. Maxwell refused to enter the room at all. He lingered at the doorway, tail puffed, staring at the ceiling. That was when Adam noticed it. Faint marks. Long, thin scratches across the ceiling, like something had been dragged across it. Like fingernails. He dragged a chair over and stood up to get a closer look. The scratches were shallow, but they stretched the entire length of the kitchen ceiling, over the sink, the fridge, and back toward the hallway. Like something had crawled across the ceiling during the night. Adam stumbled back, nearly knocking the chair over. He needed to get out. He packed a bag, scooped up Maxwell, and left the apartment without even locking the door. He stayed at a friend's place for a few days. He didn't explain everything, just said there was something wrong with his apartment. His friend raised an eyebrow but didn't ask questions. Adam tried to sleep. He tried to relax, but he couldn't, because David followed him. The first night away, Adam dreamed again. He was standing in his apartment. The green chair was still there. But this time, David wasn't sitting. He was standing on the ceiling. Hands and feet planted unnaturally, head twisted upside down, face grinning with cracked, gray lips. "You left," David whispered. "You broke the rules again." Adam jerked awake, breath ragged, drenched in cold sweat. He looked around the guest room. All seemed normal, until he noticed his phone blinking. One new photo. His hands trembled as he opened the gallery. The picture was taken while he slept. Same angle. Same low light. But this time, the green chair was in the corner of the guest room. And sitting in it, David, smiling. Adam dropped the phone. No matter where he went, David followed. The rules didn't protect him anymore. Adam returned to his apartment 3 days later. Not because he wanted to. Because he had to. The friend he was staying with said something weird happened. His cat wouldn't stop growling at the guest room corner. The lights kept flickering at exactly 3:17 a.m. And worst of all, his friend said he had a nightmare about a boy with a crushed head sitting in a green chair, whispering something about rules. Adam didn't want to bring this horror into someone else's life. So, back to the apartment he went. He half expected the place to feel colder, darker. But when he stepped inside, everything was normal. Too normal. The green chair was gone. The air was still. Maxwell circled his legs, purring like nothing had ever happened. Adam dared to hope. Maybe it was finally over. Maybe David had finished whatever unfinished business he had. That night, Adam slept for the first time in days. Until the voice came. Faint at first. It echoed through the room like it was coming from inside the walls. "You forgot me." Adam bolted upright. Maxwell hissed and ran from the room. Then came another whisper. "You left the chair." The light bulb above Adam's bed shattered. Darkness fell like a curtain. He scrambled to grab his phone and turn on the flashlight. In the pale glow, he saw the closet door slowly creaking open, inch by inch. His heart pounded so loud, he could barely hear the soft, steady breathing coming from within. He took a cautious step toward it. His phone buzzed. A new message. From a number he didn't recognize. He opened it. A voice message. Hands trembling, he pressed play. Static. Then a low, wheezing sound. Then words. "You asked the third question. Now I get to ask mine." Silence. Adam stared at the screen. Then, another message. This time just a single text. "Can I come in?" The closet door flung open violently. Adam dropped the phone and ran, tripping over the hallway rug as he scrambled to turn on every light in the apartment. Nothing followed him. But from the open closet, the darkness felt alive. It pulsed like a second heartbeat. and somewhere inside it, David waited, still asking questions. Adam didn't stay in his apartment another night. He couldn't. The silence that followed David's final message felt worse than any noise. The weight of his own breath in the room pressed down on him like a physical force. It was like the world had gone too quiet, like he was in a soundproof chamber where his thoughts had nowhere to go except to the darkness. The next day, Adam decided to reach out. Not to his friends. Not to the authorities. They wouldn't believe him. No, he contacted someone who had been part of his past. A woman named Sarah. Sarah was into the occult, into things most people wouldn't dare to understand. He had tried to ignore it all back then, dismissing it as superstition, but now he needed answers. He needed help. When he called her, Sarah didn't sound surprised. "I knew you would eventually," she said softly. "I knew once you asked that third question, it wouldn't be long before it came for you." "Sarah, You don't need anything, Adam," she interrupted. "You've already invited it in. That's the mistake everyone makes. You can't control something once you've given it access." Adam could barely focus. The image of David, the child with the crushed skull, the twisted grin, kept flashing in his mind. The voice messages. The silent darkness that still lived inside his apartment. "How do I make it stop?" he asked, his voice cracking. Sarah was silent for a long time before she answered. "Don't try to force it out. Don't fight it. Because when you do, it'll just get stronger. But you have to make sure David's focus shifts away from you." She was quiet again. Adam didn't want to ask, but the question had already formed in his mind. "Do you mean I have to give him someone else?" There was a pause, a long pause. "Yes," Sarah whispered. "That's the only way." Before Adam could protest, Sarah continued. "You have to make the sacrifice, Adam. You need to make sure David is distracted enough to leave you alone. You can't escape this by running. It'll follow you." A chill ran down Adam's spine. He hung up the phone. The rest of the day was a blur, frantic searches online, calling anyone who might know about curses, rituals, or any way to banish something like David. But nothing made sense anymore. Nothing helped. By dusk, he found himself in his apartment again. The lights were all on, but they didn't seem to offer any comfort. The green chair was gone, but the air felt heavy. Too heavy. That's when he saw it. A small, innocent thing tucked into the corner of the room, a doll. It was made of cheap, tattered cloth, and its eyes were buttons, black and glassy. It had no mouth. Its stitched hands were clasped in front of it as if it were praying. It hadn't been there before. Adam approached it cautiously. As his fingers brushed the doll's head, his phone buzzed. One message. "I'm ready for my next question." A wave of nausea washed over Adam. He had broken the rule. He had crossed the line. And now there was no going back. Adam's heart raced as he stared at the doll in his hands. Its button eyes, cold and lifeless, stared back at him, almost as though it knew something he didn't. Something that would change everything. A sudden sound made him freeze. The scratching, that horrible, familiar sound, echoed through the apartment louder than ever. It was no longer coming from the walls. It was in the floor, in the ceiling, in the air itself. Adam's breath hitched. The whispering started again. This time it was clearer. Louder. "You asked the third question, Adam. Now I get to ask mine." The temperature in the room plummeted. Adam's breath became visible in the air. He shivered, feeling the weight of something unseen pressing down on him. "Can I come in?" the voice repeated. It wasn't David's voice anymore. It was something else, something older, darker. And it wasn't asking anymore. Suddenly, the room felt crowded, as though it was full of eyes, watching him from every corner. From the shadows. From the cracks in the walls. They were everywhere, invisible but there. Maxwell the cat was nowhere to be seen. He had disappeared days ago, and Adam hadn't heard a single meow, not even a rustle of paws. It was like the cat had just vanished. He dropped the doll. He didn't want it near him. He didn't want anything from this nightmare anymore. But as he stepped back, his foot knocked over a framed photo on the table. The glass cracked and the photo spilled out. The image was of Adam standing in front of his apartment building, smiling. But behind him there was something wrong. A shadow. A figure that didn't belong. The figure of a small child standing just behind his shoulder, staring directly into the camera. Adam's chest tightened. How long had it been there? How long had that figure been in his life, watching, waiting? He grabbed the photo, his hands shaking, and turned it over. On the back, in a child's handwriting, was a single sentence. "You were always going to be mine." The whispers grew louder, closer. Adam dropped the photo, his legs unsteady beneath him. He couldn't breathe. The walls felt like they were closing in. He staggered toward the door, his mind screaming at him to escape, to run, to get out of this place before it was too late. But the door wouldn't open. He yanked the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Suddenly, the scratching sound returned, this time above him, behind him. It wasn't coming from the walls anymore. It was inside his head. "You asked the third question." The voice hissed again, closer this time in his ear. The air thickened, the pressure unbearable. Adam spun around, gasping for air, but he was met with nothing. Nothing but darkness. That was when he saw it. The eyes. In the darkness of the hallway, the eyes were watching. Not from the walls. Not from the corners. But from the doorway. Two large, black eyes floating in the void. Hollow, empty, and endless. Adam couldn't move. The air crackled with a low, menacing hum. Then, in the corner of his vision, something shifted. Something small and quick, like a shadow darting across the floor. And before he could react, it was standing right in front of him. David. Not the child's body. But something worse. Something other. David's eyes were no longer just hollow pits. They were full of malice. Full of darkness. Full of rage. And in his hands, David held something. A key. It was the key to Adam's apartment. Adam's breath hitched. His heart skipped a beat. "You were never supposed to leave," David whispered. And then Adam realized something. David wasn't the one who had been haunting him. It had been the thing behind David. And now it was inside him. Adam's legs gave way and he collapsed to the floor. His body felt like it was being pulled down, crushed by invisible weight. His heart raced in his chest, his breath ragged, gasping for air that felt thinner with every second. David stood before him, his eyes now glowing with a malevolent light, far more intense than anything Adam had ever seen. The child's face was twisted into something grotesque, half human, half shadow. The key in David's hand gleamed with an eerie, sickly shine. But it wasn't David who terrified Adam the most anymore. It was what stood behind him. A dark shape. Adam's eyes couldn't focus on it, but he could feel it. It was massive, a wall of darkness that stretched across the entire room, an ancient presence with a hunger that seemed to reach into his soul. And that voice, that hollow, crushing voice echoed in his mind again. "You shouldn't have come back." It wasn't just a whisper now. It was a screech reverberating in his skull, piercing through every thought, every memory, every ounce of reason he had left. His body screamed to run, to do anything, but the darkness held him still like a vice around his chest. David's small, pale face loomed closer, his smile impossibly wide. "You asked, and now I have to answer," David whispered, his voice soft but with a chilling edge. "But it's too late, Adam. You should have stopped asking. Now you belong to me." Adam tried to speak, but his throat was paralyzed as though the words were trapped behind an invisible wall. The weight of his body felt unbearable, his arms shaking as he tried to push himself off the floor, but the darkness pressed him down harder, filling his mind with images of endless, hollow eyes. "You're mine now," David repeated, his voice almost joyful, "just like all the others." Adam's vision blurred, the edges of the room stretching, distorting as if he were losing grip on reality. The shadows seemed to move around him, whispering his name, dragging him deeper into the void. And then everything went black. When Adam opened his eyes again, he was somewhere else. The apartment was gone. The walls were gone. The lights, the furniture, the green chair, it had all disappeared. He stood in a long, narrow hallway. The walls were alive, pulsating with strange, otherworldly energy. There were doors on either side, but they weren't doors. They were windows, windows into places Adam couldn't recognize. Behind one window, he saw the faint outline of a body. A woman, her face pale and lifeless. Behind another, a man with a twisted grin, staring directly at Adam. And then, behind one of the windows, he saw himself. Trapped. His face was gaunt, hollow-eyed, like someone who had been staring into the void for far too long. Adam screamed. But his voice didn't make a sound. In the distance, he could hear the faintest whisper. "You can't leave, Adam." The voice, like before, David's, but it didn't matter anymore. Adam's heart stopped. It was over. He had crossed the line. He had belonged to David all along. And as the darkness took him completely, Adam realized the terrible truth. There was never any escape. When Adam's consciousness returned, if it could even be called that, he wasn't sure where he was. The hallway stretched endlessly, an inescapable tunnel of shadows and whispers. The windows on the walls were no longer transparent. Instead, they were dark, opaque like mirrors, reflecting Adam's own terror back at him. He stumbled forward, disoriented. His legs felt stiff, his body weak from something he couldn't comprehend. But every step he took made the air around him grow heavier, more suffocating. "You shouldn't have left," came a voice behind him, hollow, echoing through the walls. Adam spun around, but there was no one there. The sound had come from everywhere, as if the room itself was speaking. Then, from the corner of his vision, he saw it. The key. It floated just above the ground, glowing with that sickly, unnatural light. Adam's heart raced as he reached for it, instinctively, almost without thought. But as his fingers brushed the cold metal, a jolt of electricity shot through him. It felt like his entire body was being pulled apart from the inside. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of voices, all David's. "You thought you could escape?" David's voice hissed from the darkness. The key vibrated in Adam's hand as though it had a will of its own. Then it dropped, clattering to the floor in front of him. When Adam looked up, everything around him had changed. The hallway was gone. The endless stretch of shadow had dissipated into a room that felt all too familiar. His apartment. But not the apartment as it had been. No, this was something else entirely. The walls were cracked, blackened, as if burned by some great force. The floor was uneven, the ceiling sagging in places. It was destroyed, decaying. And standing in the middle of the room, just past the broken window, was David. The child's body was gone, replaced by something far more horrifying. David was no longer small, he was tall, towering, a twisted figure that barely resembled a human. His face was stretched, his skin pale and lifeless, his eyes like black pools that seemed to absorb all light. Adam's body trembled, his pulse racing. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. But it was. David stepped forward, the ground trembling beneath his feet with each movement. "You came back," David said, his voice too calm for the terror that filled the room. "You thought you could escape the curse, but this is where you belong now." Adam took a step back, instinctively reaching for the door, but it slammed shut, trapping him inside. David grinned, his teeth sharp, gleaming. "Now that you've crossed the line, you get to stay. Forever." The room grew darker, the shadows crawling along the walls like living things. Adam's breath quickened. He couldn't think, couldn't breathe. "But don't worry, Adam," David said, his voice full of mock sympathy. "You won't be alone. Not anymore." The darkness crept closer, swallowing him whole. The air was thick, suffocating, and Adam felt himself losing grip on reality once again. As the shadows closed in, he saw the key. It was glowing once more, pulsing with an eerie light. But this time it wasn't lying on the floor. It was in David's hand. David held the key, his grip tight, his eyes filled with an insidious hunger. And then, in a voice that sent chills down Adam's spine, David spoke one final time. "This time you stay with me." And everything went black again. Adam's eyes opened again, but it wasn't the same. The world around him was different, fractured, as though the space itself had twisted into something unrecognizable. His body felt heavier than before, weighed down by an unseen force, and his mind was clouded with the echoes of 1,000 whispers. "You don't get to leave." David's voice, once childlike, now echoed through Adam's skull, a hollow, distorted version of itself. The words seemed to penetrate the very fabric of Adam's being, pulling him deeper into the darkness. His limbs were bound by something invisible, paralyzed by the very air he breathed. But Adam's will was still there, shaking, fragile, but still fighting. He tried to move, to scream, but no sound came out. The darkness pressed in from all sides, a suffocating presence that choked the life from him. You never should have asked the third question. The room was gone now, replaced by something other. It was an endless void, a place between places, where time and space no longer had meaning. The blackness stretched for eternity, swallowing everything. The only thing that existed now was Adam, and David. David stood before him, towering, no longer a child but a twisted, monstrous figure, half shadow, half man. His eyes glowed like burning coals, his skin stretched tight over bones that seemed too long, too jagged. His mouth was open, but it was no longer filled with words. It was filled with teeth, rows and rows of sharp, gleaming teeth. Adam wanted to scream, but his throat was frozen, his mouth dry. David tilted his head as though curious, then smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile, it was a grin full of malice, full of something worse than hate. "You think you can escape? You can't, Adam. Not anymore. You've asked the questions. And now you're mine." The words felt like chains wrapping around Adam's chest, tightening with every breath. He couldn't move, couldn't fight back. Suddenly, the ground beneath Adam's feet cracked open, revealing a chasm of nothingness. He tried to step back, but his feet wouldn't obey. He was being pulled toward it, dragged to the edge of the abyss. The darkness beckoned him, a void that promised an eternity of torment. David's hand shot out, his fingers long and skeletal. His touch was ice cold as it closed around Adam's arm. "You're not getting away. You belong to me now. Forever." Adam's world twisted and blurred. The ground disappeared beneath him and he was falling into the abyss, into the dark, cold emptiness that David had promised. But before he hit the ground, something shifted. A crack appeared in the darkness, a glimmer of light. It was fleeting, just a brief flicker. But it was enough. A voice, Sarah's voice, cut through the blackness like a blade. "Adam, focus. Don't let it take you." The words were like a lifeline. Adam gritted his teeth, fighting against the pull of the abyss. His vision flickered, and for a moment he saw Sarah's face, her determined, wide eyes, glowing faintly in the darkness. "You still have a choice," she said urgently. "But you have to break the binding. You have to destroy the key." The words resonated within him, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Adam's fingers twitched. He looked down at his hand, still gripping the invisible chains that held him in place. The key. He could feel it now, pulsing in his palm, buried deep within him. He knew what he had to do. "Destroy the key," Adam whispered, his voice ragged and broken. The moment the words left his mouth, the world shuddered. The chains around him tightened, pulling him closer to the void. But something shifted. The key, the source of his torment, the object that had bound him to David, was now at the center of his thoughts, his very being. It was the anchor. It was the source. Adam closed his eyes, focused all his remaining strength, and pulled. He could feel it, like a knot in his chest, unraveling. The force was immense, but he had to break it. He had to destroy it. The key shattered, and everything stopped. The moment the key shattered, the darkness around Adam fell silent. For a brief, fleeting instant, Adam thought it was over. The grip on his body loosened, and the weight of the curse seemed to fade into the ether. His chest no longer felt tight, suffocated by the invisible chains that had bound him for so long. The darkness receded, and for the first time since the nightmare had begun, Adam felt a glimmer of hope. But that hope was fleeting. The air shifted, thickened. The shadows began to whisper again, louder this time. "You cannot destroy what was never meant to be destroyed." The voice came from everywhere, echoing through Adam's mind, vibrating against his skull. It was a voice he had heard before, but it wasn't David's. It wasn't the child anymore. It was the thing behind David. The force that had been pulling the strings, the thing that had been waiting for this moment. Adam's knees buckled and he collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath. He tried to push himself up, but the air seemed to press down on him like 100 heavy hands. His vision blurred, and he could feel the pull of the abyss creeping back into his mind. "You think you've won?" The voice laughed, low and sinister. "You're too late, Adam. It's already begun." His body jerked violently as though some unseen force was forcing him to look up. When he did, he saw it. David. But not in the form he had seen before. This was something worse. David's body had changed, twisted, darkened, as though the very essence of the child had been replaced with something far older, far more powerful. His skin was cracked and scorched, like something long dead, and his eyes were pools of swirling black energy. The key, the one Adam had destroyed, was no longer gone. It was inside David, embedded in his chest, glowing with a pulsating light that made Adam's stomach churn. "You freed me, Adam," David said, his voice now impossibly deep, booming, reverberating through the room. "You didn't break the curse. You became part of it. You're mine now." Adam's heart pounded in his chest as he backed away. The shadows in the room flickered and shifted, dancing like living things, crawling up the walls, closing in on him. The room had become a realm unto itself, a place where the laws of reality no longer applied. David took a step forward, and the ground cracked beneath his feet. "You think you can escape? You think you can fight this?" David laughed, but it wasn't the laughter of a child anymore. It was the sound of something far older, far more malevolent. "I was never a child. I was always this." The room seemed to fold in on itself. The air grew colder, sharper. Adam's breath came in ragged gasps as he fought to keep himself grounded. But every step he took felt like he was sinking deeper into a nightmare. "You've broken the key, Adam," David continued, his form now towering above him, shifting in and out of focus. "But now you're bound to it. And as long as it exists, you will never be free." Suddenly, Adam felt a pull, stronger than before, sharper than before. It was like the key was inside him once again, tethering him to David. The air grew thick with an unnatural energy, and Adam's hands trembled as he fought against the invisible force that sought to drag him back into the darkness. "No," Adam whispered, his voice weak but defiant. "I won't be part of this." But David only smiled, his eyes now glowing with an unholy fire. "You already are." The world tilted and everything around Adam shattered, like glass breaking, 1,000 pieces scattering into nothingness. He was falling again, falling into the endless chasm of shadows that had been his prison. But this time something was different. There was a sense of finality. Adam could feel the darkness closing in on him, suffocating him, but this time he felt a strange calm. The voice of Sarah echoed in his mind again. "You still have a choice, Adam. You can fight it. You can break free." With the last of his strength, Adam clutched at the fragments of the key in his mind, the only thing that could save him. He didn't know if it would work, but he had to try. The darkness screamed in fury as Adam pulled at the fragments of the key, shattering them one by one. And in that moment Adam knew. This wasn't just about escaping the curse. It was about breaking it. For good. The last of the key shattered within Adam's mind, but instead of freedom, the world around him collapsed. There was no light, no sound, just the void, an endless expanse of blackness that stretched on forever. The weight of it pressed down on him, pulling him deeper into an abyss that had no end, no escape. He could feel it in his chest, the sensation of being swallowed whole, consumed by something far older, far darker than anything he could have ever imagined. David's presence loomed above him, a force, a malevolent entity that was not bound by the laws of reality. The child he had known, David the ghost, the twisted spirit, was no more. This was something else entirely, something far more terrifying. "You were always going to be part of this, Adam," David's voice echoed from every direction, a rumbling growl, low and distorted. "I was never a child. I was always this. And you've already given me everything I need." Adam's breath came in shallow, panicked gasps as he struggled to remain conscious. His body felt weightless, floating in a space where nothing existed but the darkness and the intensity of David's gaze, those burning black eyes that seemed to bore into his very soul. David stepped forward, his form shifting, warping like smoke. He towered above Adam, far too tall, far too powerful. "You've already broken the key. The curse is now yours." Adam's heart pounded violently in his chest, but his mind, his spirit, clung to the only thing that could save him, the fragments of the key that still remained inside him. "I don't belong to you," Adam managed to whisper, his voice cracked, barely a sound. David's mouth stretched into an eerie grin, a smile that could barely be called a smile at all, his teeth sharp and gleaming in the darkness. "You already do." Adam's hands trembled, but he reached out, feeling the remnants of the key buried deep within him. The fragments were still there, shards of power, of something ancient and broken. They pulsed with energy, vibrating in his chest like a beating heart. And then, something within him clicked. A surge of energy shot through his body, and for a split second the world around him shifted. Reality cracked open, revealing glimpses of what lay beyond, glimpses of a world where darkness reigned and David was its king. But Adam refused to accept it. He couldn't. Not after everything. "This is not your world," Adam hissed, his voice growing stronger. "I won't let you have it." David's smile faded. His eyes narrowed. "You can't stop it, Adam. You've already opened the door. You've already invited me in." The shadows around them thickened, swirling like smoke. The room they stood in, if it could even be called that, was no longer familiar. It was an ever-shifting nightmare, walls closing in, floors disappearing, gravity warping. Adam felt himself slipping further and further, as though he were being pulled into the very heart of the curse, the very source of the darkness. But then he felt something else. A spark. It was a memory, a thought. Sarah. Her face appeared before him, a flicker in the void, her voice cutting through the blackness like a blade. "Fight, Adam. You are stronger than this. You can still choose." The words were like a lifeline, and Adam grasped them, pulled them close to him. They were real. They were his strength. And in that moment, Adam realized something that had been right in front of him all along. David wasn't just a child. He wasn't just a ghost or a curse. David was the manifestation of the curse itself. The key was only a symbol, a link to the force that had been waiting for Adam to break it. But the curse had one weakness, and Adam was the only one who could exploit it. He closed his eyes, drawing on everything inside him, focusing all his energy on the fragments of the key that remained. The shards of power. The broken pieces that had once anchored him to David. "I'm not afraid of you anymore," Adam said, his voice now steady, filled with resolve. "I'm taking this back." With every ounce of his will, Adam focused on the broken pieces. He pulled them together, drawing the power that had once controlled him and using it to break it. The world around him shook, the darkness roiling as if in pain. The shadows screamed, the air vibrating with an energy so intense it threatened to tear everything apart. And then, just as everything seemed to break open, Adam reversed it. The curse shattered. The darkness shattered like glass, splintering into thousands of shards that scattered into the ether. Adam's body felt weightless, as if he were suspended in a vacuum, drifting between the remains of the world that had once been. He didn't know how long he floated in that strange limbo. It felt like hours, maybe days, but time had become irrelevant. All that mattered was the stillness. The world around him had changed. The oppressive weight of the curse, the fear that had plagued him for so long, had lifted. For the first time in what felt like forever, Adam could breathe freely. He opened his eyes. The darkness had gone. There were no more shadows, no more whispers. The room, or what remained of it, was bathed in a pale, unearthly light. Adam took a slow step forward, his feet finding solid ground beneath him. The reality he had once known had returned, but it wasn't quite the same. There was something different about it, something off. And then he saw it. David stood in front of him, just as he had been before, but now there was an undeniable presence about him. The boy was no longer a twisted specter of childhood innocence. The change in him was more than physical. It was as though he had been born anew, no longer a ghost, but something far darker. David smiled, but it wasn't the wicked, taunting grin Adam had grown used to. This smile was filled with a strange, sorrowful understanding. "You did it," David said softly, his voice no longer that of a child, but something older, wiser. "You broke it. The curse is gone, Adam. But it's not what you think." Adam's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice trembling with uncertainty. David's gaze softened, and for the first time, Adam saw the truth in his eyes. It wasn't anger. It wasn't malice. It was something else entirely. "I am the curse," David explained, his tone filled with a deep, sorrowful weight. "I was never meant to be freed. I was always the curse. The key, the questions, everything, it was all a part of me. And by destroying the key, you didn't break the curse. You became it." Adam's stomach dropped. A cold realization spread through him, creeping into the pit of his gut. "No," Adam whispered, shaking his head in disbelief. "That can't be possible. I stopped it. I destroyed it." David nodded slowly, the sadness in his eyes growing stronger. "You did what you had to. But by doing so, you've tied yourself to the curse. You're no longer free, Adam. You've become part of it. Just like me." The words hit Adam like a physical blow, the weight of their meaning sinking deep into his chest. His mind reeled, trying to make sense of it all. "Oh, I'm stuck," Adam asked, his voice barely above a whisper. David's eyes glimmered with the faintest hint of pity. "Not just stuck. You're bound. Forever." The world around them began to fade. The pale light flickered and dimmed, and the room disintegrated into dust. The very fabric of reality seemed to be crumbling, unraveling, and in its place the shadows returned. But they were no longer just whispers. They were alive, swirling around Adam like hungry spirits. "This is where it ends," David said softly. "You wanted to break free. But now you are the curse. You will haunt this place forever like I did." Adam's heart pounded in his chest, panic rising within him. "No," he cried out, his voice echoing through the void. "I can't be like this. I can't be you." But David's gaze never wavered, his eyes filled with an endless, ancient sadness. "You already are. You always have been." With that, the world around Adam collapsed completely, the last of the light fading into darkness. The void closed in, swallowing him whole. The final whispers of the curse surrounded him, and Adam knew that no matter how hard he fought, he was now a part of the nightmare.